He had never been good at reading instructions, but somehow, stepping onto this shimmering platform in the middle of an alien chamber seemed worse than any DIY disaster back on Earth. The floor pulsed beneath his feet like it had a heartbeat of its own, or maybe it was just his. He tried to take a step forward and immediately lost his balance, arms flailing, catching himself on a levitating orb that emitted a soft hum and a very judgmental glow. "Okay," he muttered. "Deep breaths. Don't touch anything that looks sentient." He had no idea if the orb was sentient, but it glared at him in a way that suggested it had opinions. A low, melodic hum filled the room, vibrating straight into his chest, and he froze. It wasn't coming from the walls or the floor, it was coming from her. The voice of the alien queen was soft, hypnotic, and vaguely accusatory all at once. "Welcome," she said, and he flinched. "You are here because you have been selected for a very important test." "Oh, great," he muttered under his breath. "The test nobody reads the rules for." The platform beneath him shifted slightly, like the room itself was nudging him forward. Then, with a subtle motion he barely noticed, a series of floating screens illuminated around him. They displayed silhouettes, shapes, and diagrams that made his brain twitch. "Do not panic," the Queen continued, though her tone carried that unmistakable mix of amusement and something else. Something dangerously personal. "Your challenge is simple. You must prove your capacity for honesty, desire, and adaptability." He swallowed hard. Honesty and desire? Together? For a faceless alien? The words felt like tiny needles in his brain. "Adaptability," he repeated aloud. "Sure, I can adapt. I can, dodge slime blobs. Is that part of it?" A small burst of shimmering liquid erupted near his feet. He yelped, stepping back, only to land squarely in a patch of translucent goo that oozed up like it wanted a hug. The platform tilted slightly under the weight of his flailing, and he nearly somersaulted into the glowing panels. The Queen chuckled, a sound that vibrated through his chest and made him blush despite himself. "Very good," she said, though it sounded far too pleased. "You are already revealing more than you know." He coughed. "More than what?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, a holographic projection appeared in front of him, a floating orb that seemed to mimic his heartbeat. Each pulse caused it to shift colors, from soft lavender to a shocking pink that made him glance around nervously, certain someone else must be watching. "This will track your emotional reactions," the Queen explained, though her tone had that teasing, intimate cadence that made him aware of every nerve ending. "Fear, embarrassment, excitement, even desire." His stomach twisted. Desire? What did she want him to desire? He couldn't even make small talk without tripping over words, let alone with a galactic monarch whose presence seemed to seep into his very bones. "First question." Her voice purred, and he jumped as if someone had flicked him. "Tell me, what do you most fear about intimacy?" He stammered, his mind scrambling for an answer. Intimacy was terrifying in all forms, emotional, physical, even small talk with coworkers could count. He glanced down at his hands, hoping they could offer some kind of insight, but they were just hands, flailing, trembling, hopelessly human. Rejection?" he said finally, the words sounding small and pathetic even to his own ears. "Good," she replied, almost approvingly. "You acknowledge vulnerability. A necessary first step." He couldn't tell if she was congratulating him or laughing at him, and either way, he felt like an idiot. As if to punctuate the point, a blob of iridescent slime shot up from the floor, aiming directly for his chest. He ducked, slipped, and somehow ended up tangled in one of the levitating orbs, which spun him around like a child on a carnival ride. The Queen's laugh echoed around him, rich and teasing, making his face heat up. "You move, unpredictably," she said. "Interesting." He gawked at her faceless silhouette projected in the room, unsure whether that was praise or mockery. "Unpredictable is one word for it," he muttered, trying to disentangle himself. "Clumsy is another. Definitely clumsy." She hummed, a soft vibration that tickled his ears and made him shiver despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. You see, human, these tests are not merely about skill or intellect. They are about revelation. Every stumble, every blush, every hesitant word, reveals your inner self. His inner self was currently panicking, quivering, and hoping the floor didn't decide to swallow him whole. But there was no denying it, he was revealing things. Deep, embarrassing, very personal things. How many times he had accidentally ghosted a date, how he once cried over a romantic comedy while eating ice cream alone, how he had never been very confident in anything involving attraction. The Queen floated closer, or at least her projection did, leaning over in a way that felt way too close. Tell me, human, what do you desire most? He blinked. Most humans might say something safe: money, adventure, fame. But here, faced with her voice, her presence, the floating colors tracking every pulse of his heartbeat, he felt trapped by the honesty of the moment. To survive this? He said, his voice cracking. He immediately wished he'd said literally anything else. The Queen's laughter rolled around him, sultry and amused. Honest. Clever in its simplicity. But also revealing. And just like that, he was caught. Not by chains, not by force, but by sheer absurdity and intimacy of her attention. Each floating panel, each slime blob, each hum of alien energy seemed designed to strip away his defenses while keeping him alive. Barely. And yet, he noticed something unexpected. Even as he flailed, even as embarrassment tingled across his skin like static, a strange thrill ran alongside it. He wanted to survive this test, yes, but maybe, just maybe, he wanted to see where it would lead. The first test had already begun. He barely had a moment to catch his breath before the floor shifted again, sliding him forward with a soft, almost seductive hum. The walls pulsed with light, forming a twisting corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly, each curve reflecting colors that made his head spin. He squinted, trying to find a foothold, but the floor seemed to anticipate every movement. Every step he took, the tiles shifted, bouncing him slightly, teasing him like a child learning to walk. He groaned. Okay. I get it. Don't panic again, he muttered, already slipping on a patch of iridescent slime that appeared as if out of nowhere. Observe, human. The Queen's voice purred, soft but commanding. This is your next test, the maze of desire. Every reaction will be recorded. Every flinch, every hesitation, every desire. He froze. Desire? Again? He didn't even know what the last test had revealed, and now he had to navigate a maze that tracked emotional honesty? He took a cautious step forward and immediately triggered a floating orb that squealed in what he could only describe as a shrill, judgmental tone. The floor beneath him tilted, sending him sliding sideways into another patch of glowing goo. The Queen's laugh echoed around him, melodic and teasing, and he couldn't help but blush despite being faceless in her eyes. Predictable, she said, the words soft and teasing. But also, charming. He paused, hands braced on the shifting walls. Charming? Him? He wasn't sure whether to be flattered or horrified. Every attempt to regain composure ended with him slipping, flailing, or bumping into yet another floating object that seemed entirely designed to humiliate him. One orb latched gently onto his shoulder like a clingy puppy, and he spent a good 30 seconds trying to pry it off, only for it to squish out a stream of iridescent liquid across his chest. Excellent, the Queen said, her voice thick with amusement. You are already revealing more than your form allows. What form? He asked, exasperated, wiping goo from his shirt. I'm just trying not to die here. You misunderstand, she replied. This is not about survival. It is about expression. Every slip, every blush, every hesitant word tells me everything about you. And every mistake is a lesson. A lesson? He wasn't sure he was learning anything except that alien slime was very sticky and very judgmental. As he stumbled forward, he realized the corridor walls shifted with his emotions. He thought about panic, and a wall lit up in shocking pink. He tried to calm down, focused on a deep breath, and the wall turned a soft lavender. The Queen's laughter followed him like a tangible presence. Ah, human, you cannot hide even from yourself. Somehow, he made it to a small platform, only to find floating holographic shapes hovering in front of him. Now, the next lesson, she said, and he flinched. Seduction, human? Across species. This is very important. He blinked. I'm not sure I have a species-crossing seduction manual on me. The Queen's laughter was musical, teasing, and strangely seductive. No manual. Just instinct. And mistakes. A projection appeared, a glowing silhouette demonstrating a series of gestures. He tried to mimic them, arms waving in the air, hips swaying in what he assumed was seductive, intergalactic fashion. The moment he struck a pose, a patch of goo shot up, hitting his face. He slipped backward, arms flailing, and somehow knocked into a hovering orb that squirted a sticky, glittering fluid across his torso. You are inventive, the Queen said, and the word made him freeze mid-slip. Though perhaps not in the way intended. He groaned, trying to disentangle himself, and realized the maze wasn't just physical, it responded to his emotional state. The more he panicked, the more walls shifted, the more slime appeared. And the more the Queen commented. Each critique, though teasing, carried that strange seductive undertone that made his face heat. Notice, human, she said softly, how your nervousness betrays you. Every failure is educational. Every stumble is entertaining. He muttered something incomprehensible, something along the lines of, I'm doomed, as another orb floated toward him, bouncing him gently like a ragdoll before squirting a thin stream of translucent fluid across his hands. He tried to wipe it off, only for the maze to subtly tilt, sending him sliding across a tile that hummed in resonance with his heartbeat. His pulse raced. The orb reacted with a sudden flash of hot pink. He cursed under his breath and glanced up at the shifting walls, realizing that they were practically alive, reacting to every emotion. The Queen's laughter surrounded him again. You are fascinating, human. Even your mistakes have elegance. He blinked. Elegance? He muttered. I'm flailing in alien slime and barely avoiding a concussion. You underestimate yourself, she replied. Her tone softened for just a moment, almost intimate, making him shiver despite the chaos. You are learning, even if you do not realize it. And every slip, every blush, is progress. By the time he reached a small landing in the maze, panting and covered in sticky, iridescent goo, he realized something strange. Despite the humiliation, the absurdity, and the sheer terror of the Queen's presence, he was having fun. Or as much fun as one could have while being trapped in a shifting, emotionally responsive alien maze, dodging slime blobs, and receiving unsolicited advice on seduction and emotional honesty. She appeared again, or rather her voice, wrapping around him like a silk ribbon. Prepare yourself, human. The next stage will test not your body, but your heart. He swallowed hard, standing amid the slime and floating orbs, heart racing, cheeks burning, and realizing that, somehow, he didn't want to run. Not entirely. There was something exhilarating about the challenge, the absurdity, and yes, the alien Queen herself. Even if he survived only by accident. By the time he stumbled onto the next platform, dripping with iridescent slime and feeling like an overcooked noodle, he realized that the Queen's tests were no longer just physical. The lights around him pulsed softly, synchronized with his heartbeat, and holographic projections of past failures flickered on the walls. Each one was exaggerated, him spilling drinks on awkward dates, tripping on his own shoelaces, sending accidentally suggestive texts to the wrong people, all replayed with comedic timing that made his stomach twist. Welcome to the confession room. The Queen's melodic voice cooed, floating from all directions at once. Here, your honesty will be absolute. Every fear, every fantasy, every embarrassment you have ever hidden, you will confess. He froze, blinking at the panels like a deer caught in headlights. Confess? Like tell someone? Exactly, she replied, a soft, teasing undertone in her voice that made him feel exposed down to his bones. But not just anyone. Me. Me, who hears and records everything, for evaluation. He swallowed hard. His face burned hotter than he thought possible. He opened his mouth and closed it. Words refused to form, as if the alien chamber itself had stolen his tongue. Finally, he managed. Okay. I once cried over a commercial about a dog, and I ate ice cream alone, on a Tuesday. A panel lit up, recording his words with a gentle glow, while a small slime blob floated in front of him, bobbing approvingly. The Queen hummed, amusement rolling through every vibration in her voice. Yes, vulnerability recognized. Delightful. And very entertaining. He groaned, muttering. Entertaining for you, maybe. Humiliating for me. Humiliation is merely perspective, she said, and he could almost hear her smirk in the tone of her voice. And now, the emotional gauntlet begins. Before he could process the words, the floor shifted again, tilting slightly as dozens of slime orbs floated into formation. They bounced gently at first, then with increasing speed, each one glowing in reaction to his emotional state. Every flinch, every flustered blink, every subtle blush triggered new streams of iridescent goo to spray across the walls, the floor, and his increasingly sticky body. He ducked and twisted, attempting to dodge them, only to misstep on a particularly slick patch of goo. He slid, arms flailing, and collided with a hovering hologram that immediately squirted a thin, sparkling liquid onto his face. The Queen's laughter echoed through the chamber, sultry, teasing, and inescapably intimate. You are reactive, she said, her voice soft and almost hypnotic. And yet, your unpredictability is charming. Even endearing. He blinked, breathless and sticky. Endearing? He asked, panting. I'm literally covered in alien goo while being hit by emotional slime orbs. She hummed, a sound that wrapped around him and made his chest tighten. Exactly. You see, human vulnerability and humor often coexist. Embrace it. And perhaps, embrace me. He froze. The words hung in the air, intimate and teasing. He wasn't sure if she meant it literally or metaphorically, but either way, the effect was immediate. His face heated, his heart raced, and he realized he was standing there, utterly defenseless, in the most personal and embarrassing way possible. Now, she continued, demonstrate your ability to adapt under intimate observation. From nowhere, a holographic obstacle appeared, a floating projection of a romantic scene from some bizarre alien culture, complete with undulating ribbons of light and suggestive shapes. He was expected to mimic certain movements, seductive gestures, expressions of longing, without colliding with the floating slime orbs. He attempted a pose, arms waving in what he hoped looked like confident allure. The slime blobs, however, had other ideas. One slapped gently against his chest, another splashed a thin line of glowing fluid across his legs, and yet another managed to bounce off his head, leaving a sticky trail that glimmered in the shifting light. You are inventive, the Queen said slowly, savoring the words. Though perhaps not in the intended manner. He groaned. I'm inventing humiliation, if that counts. The Queen hummed, soft and melodic, circling him in an invisible way that made him hyper-aware of every heartbeat. Every failure is revelation. Every mistake, education. And every blush, exceedingly entertaining. He tried to respond, but only managed a stammering. I guess I'm learning? Yes, she said, almost approvingly. Learning about yourself, and perhaps, about me. He froze again, heart thudding. The Queen's tone carried warmth now, subtle and dangerously intimate. For the first time, the absurdity didn't feel purely humiliating. There was a strange thrill in being utterly exposed, in knowing that every flinch, every slip, every embarrassed confession, was being observed by someone who seemed to care. The slime orb slowed slightly, as if acknowledging his progress. The holographic panels softened their glow. And the Queen's voice, soft, teasing, intimate, lingered around him. You see, human honesty is not just admission. It is liberation. Even in absurdity. Even in humiliation. And perhaps, in attraction. He swallowed hard, realizing he was laughing despite himself, caught somewhere between terror, embarrassment, and a strange fluttering of desire. Somehow, he had survived another round, still sticky, still flustered, but now a little more aware of the strange, intoxicating pull the Queen had over him. And he knew, with terrifying clarity, that he wasn't done yet. Not even close. He had never been so exhausted in his life. Every muscle ached, every nerve felt raw, and every inch of him was coated in a sticky, iridescent sheen that refused to come off no matter how many times he tried to wipe it away. Yet, somehow, he was still standing, barely, on the shifting platform at the center of the Queen's ever-changing chamber. The lights pulsed with his heartbeat, and the holographic orbs floated lazily around him as if mocking his every move. Human! The Queen's voice purred, silk and steel intertwined. It is time for your final challenge. Integration. He blinked. Integration? He had survived the emotional gauntlet, the maze of desire, and the confession room, but this sounded like it might require actual skill, intelligence, or perhaps sanity, all of which he was rapidly losing. You must combine everything you have learned, she continued. Your honesty, your adaptability, your charm, to pass this final test. Or fail, spectacularly. He swallowed hard and stepped forward. Immediately, the floor tilted, sending him sliding toward a floating holographic structure shaped vaguely like a heart, though stylized in a disturbingly alien way. Slime orbs floated around him in a slow orbit, each one pulsing and changing color in response to his emotions. Every misstep was amplified by his heartbeat. Every stumble made the Queen's laughter ripple around the chamber, teasing and seductive all at once. He attempted to dodge the orbs, maneuvering with more hope than skill. One splashed across his shoulder, another bounced off his thigh, leaving streaks of glittering goo that clung stubbornly to his skin. He flailed, arms windmilling, nearly colliding with the heart-shaped hologram, which reacted by projecting images of himself. Slipping on alien slime. Blushing uncontrollably. Stumbling on gestures meant to convey interspecies seduction. And somehow, despite the chaos, he laughed, partly in despair, partly in disbelief, and partly because he had no other choice. You are persistent. The Queen's voice purred, close enough that he could feel the vibration through the floor. Unpredictable, inventive, and surprisingly endearing. He froze mid-slip, blinking at the empty space, heart racing. Endearing? After everything? He was coated in slime, sticky, exhausted, and yet, the sound of her approval, so intimate, so teasing, made his stomach flutter in ways he hadn't expected. He wanted to run. He wanted to collapse. He wanted to curse his way out of the galaxy. And yet, he wanted to stay. The final test demanded not just physical finesse but emotional honesty. The Queen's holographic heart shimmered, projecting not only his blunders but also his reactions, his involuntary flinches, and the subtle traces of courage he hadn't realized he possessed. He had to mimic a sequence of gestures, part alien courtship, part human improvisation, while dodging the unpredictable orbs. Every misstep triggered bursts of sticky fluid. Every hesitation amplified the pulsing lights around him. He started awkwardly, stepping left, then right, arms flailing in ungainly imitation of the Queen's projection. One orb bounced off his shoulder and shot a streak of goo across his chest. Another grazed his ankle, making him topple sideways, only to be caught mid-fall by a levitating panel. Somehow, he ended up on the top of a small ramp, arms spread like a confused bird, as a holographic ribbon wrapped lightly around his legs, causing him to spin. Impressive! The Queen's voice echoed, silk and amusement combined. You have adapted. Even in chaos. Even in intimacy. He froze, arms spinning in midair, chest heaving. Intimacy? Chaos? Adaptation? He couldn't tell if she was complimenting him or mocking him, probably both, but somehow, it didn't matter. The absurdity, the humiliation, the sheer ridiculousness of it all had reached a strange climax of bonding. He made one last, desperate move, throwing himself toward the central heart hologram, attempting a combination of human improvisation and sheer luck. The floor tilted perfectly in his favor. A slime orb zipped past him harmlessly. Another orb hesitated, pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. And then, somehow, he completed the sequence. Perfectly imperfect. Completely accidental. Yet undeniably successful. The chamber fell silent for a heartbeat. And then, the Queen's laughter filled the space, rich, teasing, and warm, almost musical. "You, human," she said, voice lower now, tinged with something like admiration. "You have passed. And yet, you have also revealed more than you could imagine." He collapsed onto the floor, sticky, exhausted, but laughing. I passed?" he gasped, blinking up at the pulsing lights. "By accident?" "Perhaps," she purred, floating closer in a manner that felt intimate despite the faceless presentation. "Or perhaps, you were exactly what I needed to see. Honest, unpredictable, and resilient." He tried to sit up but ended up flopping onto his side, goo glimmering under the shifting lights. He groaned. "I can't believe this. I'm covered in everything. I'm exhausted. I think I almost liked it." "You did," the Queen said softly, her presence brushing against his consciousness like a warm wind. "And you would survive every test, not just because of skill, but because of your humanity." He blinked, heart racing, and realized she wasn't just teasing anymore. She was impressed. And somehow, despite everything, the slime, the embarrassment, the absurdity, he felt a strange pride. He had endured. He had laughed. He had survived, and maybe, just maybe, he had earned a spark of connection with the most alien creature he had ever met. As the chamber lights pulsed softly around him, the holographic orbs floating lazily, he realized he wasn't trapped against his will. Not entirely. He wanted to stay, if only a little. He wanted to see what the next test would be, or the next joke, or the next moment. And the Queen, with all her teasing, seductive, absurd perfection, had won. Not by force, but by making him willingly stay in her presence, sticky, humiliated, exhausted, and strangely enchanted.